It was supposed to be a perfect day. The kind of day you remember forever. Not because of what goes wrong, but because of what goes right. The sky stretched out, endless and blue, the kind that makes you feel like nothing bad could ever happen under it. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy drifted through the air, mixing with the distant sound of laughter, the clanking of roller coasters climbing their tracks, and the echoing boom of excited screams. People moved in every direction, faces lit with excitement. I remember Barron running ahead, his sneakers barely touching the pavement, his hair bouncing with each step. He had been talking about this day for weeks, going over every ride he wanted to try, every game he wanted to win. Melania walked beside me, her arm looped through mine. She wasn't much for amusement parks, but for Barron, she would go anywhere. He turned back, grinning. "Dad, can we do the Ferris wheel first?" I laughed. "Ferris wheel? What about the big rides? You talked about the roller coaster all morning." "Yeah, but I want to see the whole park first. From the top." His eyes sparkled. "Please." I nodded, and that was it. No hesitation, no second thoughts. We walked to the Ferris wheel, the line short for now. Barron bounced on the balls of his feet. Melania checked her phone, then tucked it away. The wheel creaked as it turned, letting passengers on and off, the ride operator barely looking up as he waved people forward. When it was our turn, Barron hopped in first. Melania and I followed. The door clanked shut behind us. Slowly, we started moving. The city stretched beyond the park, shining under the sun. Barron pressed his face to the glass. "Look at that." He pointed. "You can see everything." I smiled. "Yeah, buddy. Pretty great, huh?" For a moment, everything felt frozen in time. The world below kept moving, but up here we were still. Just the three of us. Then the ride jerked. A small pause. Then it started again like nothing had happened. Melania frowned. "Did you feel that?" I nodded. "Probably just the gears shifting." Barron didn't notice. He was too busy looking down, spotting different rides, guessing where he wanted to go next. We reached the top, and the wheel stopped to let passengers off at the bottom. The gondola rocked slightly. Barron turned to us, grinning. "Best view ever." Melania smiled softly. "You love this, don't you?" Before he could answer, a loud crack echoed through the air. The Ferris wheel jolted. This time, it wasn't a small shake. Our cabin swayed violently. Below us, people gasped. Someone screamed. Barron's hands gripped the seat. "Dad, just hold on," I said quickly, reaching for him. A voice crackled over the speaker. "We're experiencing a small issue, folks. Stay seated, and we'll get you down soon." I forced a smile. "See? No big deal." But Melania wasn't looking at me. She was staring down at something. "Donald," she said slowly. "Something's happening." I followed her gaze. A group of men, security, maybe, moved quickly through the crowd. People turned, pointing. Whispers spread. I didn't like it. The ride jerked again, then started moving. Faster than before. Too fast. Barron yelped as the gondola swung. Melania grabbed my arm. Below, people backed away from the ride. More security. More movement. Something wasn't right. By the time we reached the bottom, park staff were already there. A man in a dark uniform unlocked our cabin door. "Everything okay?" I asked. He didn't answer, just nodded quickly, waving us out. His eyes darted behind us, toward the growing crowd. I stepped out first. Melania followed. Barron hopped down, eyes scanning the park. "Can we go on the coaster now?" I almost laughed. "Let's take a minute, buddy." Another crackle over the speakers. "Attention all guests. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the park will be temporarily closing. Please make your way to the exits in a calm and orderly manner." People groaned. Others hurried toward the gates. Parents grabbed their kids. Barron frowned. "Why are they closing?" I didn't know, but I didn't like the way security kept glancing around, whispering into radios. "Let's get some ice cream before we go," I said, trying to keep things normal. "What do you say?" Barron perked up. "Chocolate. Anything you want." We walked past the towering roller coaster, the tracks twisting above us. I kept an eye on the people around us. Security was everywhere. Too many of them. Then Melania tensed beside me. "Donald," she whispered. "Where's Barron?" I spun. He had been right there. 1 second, he was holding my hand. The next, I used to think silence was peaceful. Before that day, I never minded a quiet room, the stillness of night, the hush before a speech. But after they disappeared, silence became something else. It was a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me. It was the sound of nothing when I needed answers. The sound of my own thoughts telling me over and over that I had failed. At first, there was chaos. Security swarmed the park. Cameras were pulled. People were questioned. I was questioned. Over and over. Where's the last place you saw them? What were they wearing? Did you see anyone following you? I answered every question, but the only answer I had was the one no one wanted to hear. I didn't know. One moment, Barron was right there, and the next, he was gone. 1 second, Melania was beside me, her hand gripping my arm, and the next, she wasn't. I turned. I searched. I called their names. Nothing. Like they had vanished into thin air. The police didn't believe that, of course. People don't just disappear. Someone had to take them. But there was no proof. No one had seen anything. Security footage from the park showed us walking, Barron laughing, Melania brushing a strand of hair from her face. And then just nothing. The footage skipped. Glitched, they called it. An error. A few minutes missing, gone like they never existed. The search went on for weeks. Theories filled the news. Some said it was a kidnapping. Others claimed they had run. That was the one that made my blood boil. Run? Melania would never leave Barron, and Barron, he wouldn't just go. Days turned to weeks. Weeks to months. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. My team begged me to take a break, to rest, but how could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Melania's worried expression. Barron's last smile. I hired the best investigators money could buy. No trail. No ransom note. No sign of them anywhere. The world moved on. But I didn't. I tried to keep up the search, to keep my life moving at the same time. It didn't work. Every event, every speech, every camera flash, I hated it. I'd be talking, shaking hands, and in the middle of it, I'd hear Barron's laugh. Clear as day. I'd spin around, expecting to see him running toward me. But he never was. I started seeing them in crowds. A glimpse of Melania's hair, the way she used to tilt her head when she was deep in thought. A boy about Barron's age, same height, same build, walking just ahead of me. I'd push through people, ignoring the protests, but by the time I reached them, it was never them. Just strangers. People stopped talking about it. The news moved on. Reporters found other stories. Friends stopped asking how I was holding up because they already knew the answer. I wasn't. 7 years. 7 birthdays Barron missed. 7 years without Melania's voice, her quiet strength. 7 years of emptiness. Then one night, everything changed. I was walking home from a meeting, my driver following a few steps behind, waiting for me to give the signal to bring the car around. The city was alive, streets glowing under the streetlights, people moving fast, trying to get where they needed to go. And then I saw him. A boy. Tall. Familiar. Something in me froze. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. He turned slightly, just enough for the light to catch his face. My heart stopped. Barron. Not a memory. Not a trick of the mind. Barron. And then, before I could call his name, before I could take a single step toward him, he ran. I didn't think. I just ran. The crowd blurred around me, voices mixing into a dull roar. My chest tightened with each step, but I couldn't stop. He was just ahead, slipping between people, moving fast. Too fast. Barron. I hadn't said his name in so long. Not like this. Not out loud, not with hope. But it was him. I knew it. The way he moved, the way his shoulders hunched forward slightly when he walked. He had grown, of course, taller now, but I would have known him anywhere. He turned a corner, disappearing into a narrow alley. I pushed harder, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. My driver shouted my name, but I didn't slow down. I reached the alley and stopped at the entrance, my breath coming in short gasps. It was dark. A single flickering light cast long shadows against the damp brick walls. Garbage bags lined the edges. The smell of rain and old food filled the air. And there, at the far end, he stood. Barron. He was half turned away from me, his hands in his pockets. He looked older, but his face was still my son's. His hair was longer, shaggier than before. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the sleeves slightly too short, as if he had outgrown it. For a moment, I just stared. 7 years. 7 years of searching, of waiting, of never knowing. And now he was right here. I swallowed hard and stepped forward. Barron. My voice was rough, barely above a whisper. He didn't move. I took another step. Barron, it's me. Slowly, he turned. His eyes met mine. Something inside me cracked. It was him. It was really him. But there was something else. Something wrong. His face was blank, unreadable. He wasn't surprised to see me. He wasn't scared or relieved or anything I had imagined he would be. His expression was calm. Too calm. I stepped closer. Barron, my God, you're alive. No answer. I reached for him, my hand shaking. He took a step back. The movement was small, but it hit me harder than any punch. I stopped. Barron, it's okay. You're safe now. We need to go. We need to. He shook his head. A lump formed in my throat. Barron, please. Your mother. His face changed at that. For the first time, something flickered in his expression. A shadow of pain. Then just as quickly it was gone. I took a slow breath. Where is she? Barron's hands clenched at his sides. He turned his head slightly, as if listening for something. Then he whispered, I can't. I frowned. You can't what? Barron, talk to me. He looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. They're watching, he said. I felt my stomach drop. Ooh, he took another step back. I have to go. No, I said firmly, stepping toward him again. No, you're coming with me. Right now. We'll figure everything out, but you're not leaving me again. His breathing was uneven now, like he was fighting something inside himself. You don't understand, he whispered. You can't understand. I reached out again, desperate, but before I could touch him, he turned and ran. Barron, I shouted, taking off after him, but he was already gone, swallowed by the darkness of the alley. I didn't think. I ran. The second Barron disappeared into the shadows. My legs moved on their own. The alley was narrow, the ground slick from earlier rain, but I pushed forward, my shoes slamming against the pavement. My breath came fast, the city sounds fading behind me. Barron, I shouted. Stop. He didn't. He was fast. Too fast. It didn't make sense. 7 years had passed, but he had been just a kid. Now he was taller, stronger, but the way he moved, the way he cut around corners like he knew exactly where to go, like he had done this before, something was wrong. I chased him through the maze of alleys, past dumpsters and fire escapes, past locked doors and dark windows. Every time I thought I was closing in, he slipped just out of reach. I was losing him. Then he made a mistake. He took a turn too sharp, his foot catching the edge of a curb. He stumbled, just for a second, but it was enough. I lunged forward, my hand grabbing the back of his hoodie. Got you, I gasped. Barron twisted, wild, fighting to break free. He wasn't the little boy I used to toss in the air. He was taller than me now, stronger than I expected. He shoved hard, nearly knocking me off balance. Let me go, he said, his voice low. Not a chance, I said, gripping his arm. You're coming with me. You're. A sound cut through the air. Footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Coming straight toward us. Barron froze. His face paled. No, he whispered. No, no, no. I turned. A figure appeared at the end of the alley, dressed in black, moving quickly. Another shadow behind them. Then another. Barron struggled harder. Dad, please. You have to let me go. I didn't. I couldn't. The figures got closer. I could see them now. Dark suits. No faces visible under the low light. Moving like they weren't in a rush, but knew exactly what they were doing. Barron yanked at my grip, his breath ragged. Dad, you don't understand. If they take me, I tightened my hold. Nobody is taking you anywhere. He shook his head. You don't get it. The men stopped a few feet away. Silent. Waiting. A single voice broke the quiet. Let him go. I turned fully, my body in front of Barron now, my chest heaving. One man stepped forward. He was taller than the rest. Calm. His voice was steady, controlled, like he had all the time in the world. You've seen enough, Mr. Trump. I clenched my jaw. I'm not leaving without my son. The man nodded slightly. Yes, you are. Barron tugged at my arm again. Dad, please. I glanced at him. His face was pale, eyes wide. I had fought for 7 years. Spent every second searching, waiting, hoping. Now, he was right here. I wasn't letting him go again. I looked back at the man in black. Who are you? He didn't answer. He just took another step forward. Then Barron did something I never expected. He turned to me, his voice shaking. I love you, Dad. And then he twisted hard, ripping free from my grip. Before I could react, he ran straight toward them. I didn't move. I couldn't. 1 second, Barron was in my hands. The next, he was gone. He ran straight toward them. Not away. Not toward me. Toward them. The men in black didn't chase him. They didn't have to. He ran willingly, like he knew there was no other choice. Like it had already been decided. The tallest man, the one who had spoken, caught Barron by the shoulder, stopping him. He didn't fight. He didn't even flinch. Just stood there, looking down at the ground. A car pulled up at the end of the alley. Black. Tinted windows. The door swung open. Barron stepped inside. I snapped out of my shock. No! My voice cracked. My legs moved, but hands grabbed me from behind. My driver. He had caught up, pulling me back before I could reach the car. The door shut. The car pulled away. I tore free and ran after it, but it was too late. The taillights faded, swallowed by the city. Gone. Again. I stood there, panting, hands clenched into fists. My mind was racing, but nothing made sense. Why had he gone with them? Why hadn't he fought? Why? My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, fingers shaking. An unknown number. I answered. Where is he? Silence. Then a woman's voice. Soft. Cold. You should stop looking, Donald. I felt my breath catch. Melania? The line went dead. I stared at the screen, my pulse thundering in my ears. My own wife. The woman who had disappeared with my son. For 7 years, there had been nothing. Not a word. Not a sign. But now this? I called the number back. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Nothing. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My driver was speaking, asking if I was okay, if I wanted to go home. Home. Home didn't exist anymore. I turned, walking fast, my mind reeling. I needed answers. I needed to find her. Because if Melania was alive, if she was out there, if she had been silent for 7 years, and she knew something, and she had chosen not to tell me. The city moved around me, fast and uncaring, but I felt frozen. The phone was still in my hand, my fingers locked around it. My own wife. 7 years of silence, 7 years of searching, and now, just 5 words. You should stop looking, Donald. I didn't stop. I couldn't. Melania was out there. Barron was out there. I had seen him, spoken to him. I had touched his arm, felt the warmth of his skin, the way he trembled when he told me they were watching. I didn't go home. There was no home. Not until I knew the truth. My driver was still with me, looking worried. Mr. Trump, we should. I held up a hand. Find out where that call came from. He nodded and made a call of his own, stepping aside. I took a breath, forcing myself to think. Melania had spoken. That meant she was alive. That meant she had known something this entire time. The question was why she had waited so long. My driver returned, his face tight. The call was untraceable. Scrambled. I exhaled sharply. Of course it was. But that didn't mean she couldn't be found. I knew where to start. An hour later, I was standing outside an apartment building, a place I hadn't been in years. The man I was looking for had been on my payroll once. Former intelligence. The kind of man who could find anything, anyone. The door opened before I knocked. A deep voice rumbled from the darkness. I saw the news. I stepped inside. The apartment was small, cluttered, walls covered in monitors. Camera feeds. Data streams. He didn't waste time with small talk. He just sat down, fingers already moving over a keyboard. Who, he asked. Melania, I said. And Barron. His hand slowed. He turned his head, eyes narrowing. After all these years, they're alive. He didn't ask how I knew. He just nodded and kept typing. Minutes passed. Then he stopped. You're not going to like this. I leaned in. The screen was filled with security footage. A building. Black SUVs parked outside. The timestamp was from earlier that night. The moment Barron had been taken. And then, another feed. A different camera. A woman stepping out of car. Melania. She looked almost the same. Older, but not by much. Dressed in black. Her face unreadable. She walked toward the building, past 2 men in suits. They didn't stop her. They let her in. She wasn't a prisoner. She belonged there. I felt something deep inside me crack. I straightened. Where is this? My contact hesitated. Then he sighed. A government facility. My jaw clenched. Which one? He stared at me. The kind that doesn't officially exist. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they made was something I never expected. Melania hadn't been taken. She had chosen this. And Barron. I didn't know what Barron had become, but I was going to find out. I drove through the night, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The facility wasn't far, tucked away beyond the city, hidden in the kind of place no one questioned. My mind raced with everything I had learned. Melania wasn't missing. She had never been missing. She had chosen to stay away, chosen to stay silent. But Barron? Barron had been a child. He hadn't chosen this. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty. I had no plan, no backup, just determination. 7 years had already been taken from me. I wasn't losing him again. The trees thinned, and then I saw it. A tall fence. Cameras. The kind of security that didn't just keep people out, it kept people in. I pulled to a stop, my heart hammering. A checkpoint stood at the entrance, 2 men stationed outside. Armed. They hadn't seen me yet. I exhaled slowly. Then I stepped out. The moment my door shut, both men looked up. Their hands hovered over their holsters, but they didn't reach for their weapons. Not yet. I walked toward them, calm, steady. One of them spoke. Sir, you need to turn around. I didn't. My name is Donald Trump. You know who I am. The other man's grip on his belt tightened slightly. This is restricted property. I took another step. My son is in there. Neither of them reacted. I had expected that. I saw him, I said, my voice firm. I spoke to him, and I know she's here too. A flicker of something passed over the first guard's face. Recognition. A moment of hesitation. I pushed forward. I'm not leaving until I see them. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, without a word, the first guard reached for his radio. A quiet exchange. Then a nod. The gates opened. I stepped inside. The facility was silent. Sterile. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, lining the long hallways. Footsteps echoed against the tile as I was led through the building. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. I would get my answers soon enough. Finally, we stopped. A door stood ahead, thick and heavy. One of the guards punched in a code. A beep. A click. The door swung open. Melania stood inside. She was exactly as I'd seen her on the footage. Composed. Dressed in black. She didn't look surprised to see me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said the only thing that mattered. Where is Barron? She looked at me. Something unreadable in her expression. Then she sighed. You shouldn't have come. The words hit like a slap. I took a step forward. That's my son in here. Our son. She glanced away for just a second. Then she turned, walking toward a panel on the wall. A screen flickered on, and there he was. Barron, sitting alone in a dimly lit room, hands resting on his knees. His face was calm. Too calm. He wasn't restrained. He wasn't locked up. But there was something in his posture. Something that sent a chill through me. I swallowed hard. Let me see him. Melania didn't answer. I turned to her, my voice rising. Melania, let me see my son. She finally looked at me. And for the first time, I saw it. The sadness in her eyes. The pain. You don't understand, she whispered. Then help me understand. She hesitated. Then she looked back at the screen. Barron hadn't moved. Hadn't even looked up. Something happened to him, she said quietly. To us. I stared at her. What are you talking about? She closed her eyes for a moment, as if choosing her next words carefully. Then she said, He's not the same boy you remember. I turned back to the screen, and as I watched, Barron slowly lifted his head. His eyes met mine, and something in them was very, very wrong. I couldn't look away. Barron stared back at me through the screen, his face unreadable. The boy I had spent 7 years searching for was right there, but something was wrong. It wasn't just the distance of time. It was in his eyes, something hollow, something I couldn't place. I turned to Melania. What did they do to him? She didn't answer right away. I stepped closer. Melania. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but then she pressed them together and shook her head. He made his choice, she finally whispered. I felt my pulse slam against my ribs. A choice? He was 10 years old when he disappeared. He didn't have a choice. Melania's hands trembled slightly. She clasped them together. He's not the same, Donald. The words felt sharp, slicing into me. I turned back to the screen. Barron blinked, slow and deliberate. Then he did something that made my stomach drop. He smiled. Not a wide, happy smile. Not even a relieved one. It was small, controlled, like someone who already knew how everything would play out. A soft knock sounded from outside the room. One of the guards leaned in, speaking low. Melania turned to listen, then looked back at me. "You need to go," she said. I let out a breathless laugh, shaking my head. No. I came here to take my son home." Melania's eyes darkened. "He is home." The words sent a deep, cold dread through me. I looked at Barron again. He hadn't moved, hadn't reacted, just sat there, watching. I slammed my fist against the desk. "Let me talk to him." Melania hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached forward and pressed a button. A speaker crackled to life. I swallowed hard. Barron, he didn't answer at first. He just tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was something unfamiliar. Then he spoke. "Dad." His voice was deeper now, but it wasn't just age. It was something else, something distant. "I'm taking you home," I said, my voice firm. He blinked once. "This is my home." A chill ran through me. "No," I said, shaking my head. "This place isn't home. They took you, Barron. They kept you here. Whatever they told you." "They didn't take me," he interrupted. I froze. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. I stayed. The room was silent. I took a step back, my mind spinning. "No," I whispered. Melania's voice was quiet. "I told you. He made his choice." I turned to her, disbelief coursing through me. Why? Why would he stay? Her throat bobbed slightly. "Because he knows things now." I shook my head. "He was just a boy." Melania exhaled softly. "Not anymore." My chest felt tight. I looked back at the screen, searching his face for some sign of the son I had lost. Some part of him that still belonged to me. "Barron," I pleaded. "Please." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. The smallest hesitation. And then, the screen cut to black. "No." I reached forward, pressing buttons, but it was gone. Melania turned away. The guard stepped back into the room. I shoved past them, storming toward the door. "Where is he?" Melania's voice was almost too soft to hear. "You won't find him again." My breath caught. I turned, heart pounding. "What are you saying?" Her eyes filled with something unreadable. "He's already gone." I didn't understand at first. Then the alarm sounded. A red light flashed overhead. A voice echoed through the building. "Security breach. Subject has left the premises." I ran. I sprinted through the halls, past guards, past locked doors. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had lost him again. And this time, I might never get him back. Thank you for listening to another exciting story from VIP Vault. If you have enjoyed listening to this story, check out our videos here.